Her children died once they reached 1 year. She had buried 7 of them, but nobody knew why. Watch this story to the end to find out.
A story written by Christy Midnight Tales.
Ifunanya was not a woman anyone could forget once they truly looked at her. She was tall, with a slim frame that pregnancy had never really softened. Her eyes always looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the kind that came from years of grief sitting quietly inside the chest. Her skin carried the dull glow of someone who had cried too many nights without an audience. Even when she smiled, it never reached her eyes. People in the village said her smile looked borrowed, like something she forced on her face just to survive another day. That morning, she stood in front of their mud hut, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other holding onto the wooden post by the door. She was heavily pregnant again. This was her 8th time carrying life in her womb, and yet there was no celebration in her eyes, no excitement in her steps, only fear. Behind their small hut, barely hidden by tall weeds and crooked banana trees, were 7 small mounds of earth, 7 graves, each marked with nothing more than stones and broken sticks. No names, no proper burial rites, just silent evidence of a pain the village had whispered about for years. Every single child Ifunanya had ever given birth to had died on the same day, the day they completed 1 year on earth. Not a day before, not a day after. The villagers called it coincidence at first. Then they called it bad luck. Later, they began to call it a curse. Obina, her husband, was already awake before the sun fully rose. He was a farmer, strong-armed, broad-shouldered, with hands hardened by years of digging the earth. He had the kind of face that looked permanently serious, not because he was cruel, but because life had never really given him a reason to laugh freely. That morning, he sharpened his hoe quietly, sitting on a wooden stool outside the hut. He did not look back at the graves behind him, but he felt them. Every day, he felt them. People had advised him countless times to take another wife. Obina, this woman is cursed. Her womb does not keep children. If you want heirs, marry again. He had heard it all. Some said it loudly, some whispered it behind his back, others said it to his face, without shame. But Obina had refused. He had buried 7 children with his own hands. He had watched his wife scream until her voice broke. He had seen her collapse beside tiny lifeless bodies. And still, he stayed. That alone made the villagers even more uncomfortable. Ifunanya moved slowly that afternoon, sweeping the compound with weak strokes. Her back ached. Her belly felt heavy, heavier than it should. Occasionally, she paused, placing both hands on her stomach, whispering prayers that barely left her lips. As night approached, the sky darkened unnaturally fast. The wind carried a strange stillness, the kind that made even insects go quiet. Ifunanya felt it before the pain started, a sharp tightening in her lower belly. She froze. Obina, she called softly. He was inside the hut, arranging dried yams. When he heard her voice, he knew immediately. He rushed out and saw her bent slightly forward, breathing heavily. "It has started?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. She nodded. Labor took her through the night. No midwife came. Some women refused to help her anymore. Others said they did not want death following them back home. So it was just Obina and Ifunanya in the small hut, lit by a single oil lamp that flickered with every scream. Her cries were not just of pain, they were of terror. Between contractions, she begged God not to take this one. She promised everything she could think of: fasting, sacrifice, silence, anything. At some point before dawn, with sweat soaking her wrapper and her voice almost gone, the child finally came. A loud cry filled the hut. For a moment, time stopped. Obina froze. Ifunanya froze. They stared at the baby in disbelief as his cry grew stronger, louder, full of life. A boy, big, healthy. His chest rose and fell steadily. His skin glowed in the dim light. Ifunanya began to sob, not loudly, quietly, like someone afraid that joy might hear her and run away. She pulled the baby close to her chest, trembling. "I will call him Ofunowa because he is gold, because he must be precious," she whispered, her voice breaking. Outside, the sky slowly began to brighten. The graves behind the hut remained silent. But for the first time in years, hope entered that small compound, even if it came shaking. And somewhere, deep inside Ifunanya's heart, fear still waited, counting down to 1 year. Ofunwa did not grow like an ordinary child. He expanded, like life itself had decided to settle fully inside him. From the moment he opened his eyes to the world, his body responded as though it had waited long for permission to stay. His skin was smooth and warm, his cries loud and confident, his grip surprisingly strong for a baby barely weeks old. By the time he was 2 months old, women who passed the hut stopped to stare longer than they should. "This one looks different," someone murmured one afternoon. Ifunanya heard it and pretended not to. She had learnt long ago that hope spoken aloud had a way of dying faster. As the months rolled on, Ofunwa became beautiful in a way that unsettled people. His cheeks grew round and full, his eyes alert and observant. When he smiled, it was wide and deliberate, like he knew exactly what he was doing. He laughed often, deep belly laughter that filled the hut and spilled into the compound. For the first time in years, a child's sound replaced silence in that place of graves. Yet, fear never left Ifunanya. It lived in her chest, breathing quietly. Every single morning before the sun rose, she reached out to touch him, not to wake him, just to confirm. She placed her palm on his chest, her ear close to his mouth, waiting for breath. Obina watched her closely. He said little, but the way his eyes followed her told its own story. He too was afraid, but he carried his fear differently. He buried it inside his silence and worked harder on the farm, digging the soil as if effort alone could change fate. The villagers never stopped talking. At first, they spoke with cautious optimism. Maybe this one will break the pattern. But optimism does not live long where death has history. Soon, the whispers returned. "Let us wait and see. Are you sure this one will exceed 1 year? She has reached 10 months before, remember?" They counted quietly, some counted openly. Ifunanya heard everything. On her way to the stream, she heard women fall silent as she passed. 9 months passed, then 10. On the day Ofunwa turned 10 months old, nothing happened at first. He laughed, he ate, he slept. Ifunanya tried to convince herself that this child was different. That night, his cry changed. It was not the cry of hunger. It was not the cry of discomfort. It was thin, strained, painful. Panic swallowed her whole. Ifunanya ran out of the hut barefoot, holding him tightly to her chest. She did not care who saw her. She did not care how she looked. She dropped to her knees in the middle of the compound, dirt staining her wrapper, tears pouring freely. "Please," she screamed into the night. Her voice cracked the silence. She lifted the child upward, her arms trembling. "Take me instead," she cried. "I am tired. Take me and leave him." Her screams carried far. Doors opened. People gathered at a distance. No one touched her. Some crossed themselves. Some shook their heads. Some whispered that it had begun again. "If I have offended you, forgive me. If my womb is cursed, destroy me, but leave this child." Ofunwa whimpered softly, weak and helpless in her arms. The wind moved strangely. The night listened, and somewhere, unseen, something else listened too. For 3 days, death hovered close, and then quietly stepped back. On the 4th morning, Ofunwa opened his eyes fully and laughed. It happened so suddenly that Ifunanya froze where she stood. She was sitting beside him, eyes sunken, body weak from days of crying and begging. When she heard the laughter, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. She leaned closer, her heart pounding violently, afraid to believe what she was seeing. Ofunwa stretched his hands toward her. He was cool to the touch again, his breathing steady, his eyes bright. He kicked his legs playfully, as if nothing had ever happened. People began to talk again. "This one is strong. Maybe the spirits have accepted him." Still, fear did not fully leave Ifunanya's chest. It only loosened its grip slightly, enough to allow her to function. As Ofunwa crawled, then stood, then attempted to walk, villagers began to advise her. One woman pulled her aside one evening and whispered, "Do night cleansing." Another said, "Carry him to the river before dawn. Let the water know his name." Someone else added, "There are sacrifices done on the road, at crossroads. It confuses spirits." At first, Ifunanya resisted, but fear is persuasive. Night after night, the advice piled up until it sat heavily in her mind. She shared it with Obina. He listened quietly, staring into space for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. "If it will keep him," he said, "we will do it." And so they did. Under the cover of darkness, they walked barefoot to places no mother wanted to take her child. They stood by lonely roads at midnight, whispering words they barely understood. They went to the river when the moon was weak, allowing cold water to touch Ofonwa's feet while Ifunanya trembled beside him. They followed instructions given in hushed tones, desperate to outsmart whatever had claimed their other children. Ifunanya hated every moment, but she loved her son more than fear. Ofonwa continued to grow. By 11 months, he was already walking clumsily, falling and rising again with stubborn determination. His laughter returned fully. People even began to smile freely around him. Still, some counted. The day approached quietly, his first birthday. That morning, Ifunanya woke before the cock crowed. Hope and fear bought openly in her eyes. She cleaned the hut obsessively, sweeping and resweeping the compound as though dirt itself could attract death. She washed clothes, arranged the little things they had prepared, and bathed Ofonwa carefully. Her hands shook as she dressed him. She kept looking at the sky, waiting for the sun to rise, waiting for time to move. Obina sat in the corner of the hut, silent. He had buried too much hope already. As dawn approached, the air changed. Ofonwa's body grew hot. Ifunanya noticed it instantly. Her heart dropped. She touched her forehead again and again, praying she was imagining it. His breathing began to quicken, shallow and rapid, just like before. "No," she whispered, "not today." Her voice rose as panic took over. Neighbors gathered quickly. They had seen this pattern too many times. Some women began to cry softly. Others stood still, watching, their faces tight with pity. Obina remained in the corner of the hut, staring at the ground. Hope had finally drained out of him. Ifunanya screamed. "Please," she cried, clutching the child. "Do not take my son, take me instead." Ofunwa gasped for breath in her arms. Then the sky darkened. Rain began to fall suddenly, heavy drops hitting the ground violently. Ifunanya screamed again and ran out into the rain, holding Ofonwa tightly. People rushed after her, calling her name, trying to stop her, grabbing at her wrapper. She broke free. Barefoot, soaked, mad with fear, she ran toward the great Iroko tree of truth. That tree was not ordinary. It was where villagers went when they wanted answers they were not ready to hear. It was said that lies could not survive beneath its branches. Ifunanya fell at its base, crying, begging, shouting until her voice broke completely. Rain soaked her body, mud covered her knees. She pressed her forehead to the earth. "Tell me the truth," she screamed. "Why my children?" Thunder rolled. Then, suddenly, a clay pot appeared.
The clay pot sat quietly beside her. It had not been there before. Ifunanya turned slowly and looked at it. Her heart pounded. With trembling hands, she reached out and touched the rim. The moment her fingers made contact, the world around her fell silent. The rain faded into nothing, and then memories rose, not gently, violently. She was no longer a grown woman kneeling beneath a tree. She was young again, thin, angry, invisible. She saw her childhood compound clearly. Her mother worn and tired, surrounded by 7 daughters, 7 girls, no sons. Each time her mother gave birth, her father's face hardened a little more. Each time, his disappointment grew heavier in the house. He stopped laughing, stopped coming home early, stopped hiding his bitterness. Until one day, he brought another woman home, a second wife, young, smiling, favored. When that woman gave birth, she did not give birth to one child. She gave birth to twin boys. The compound changed overnight. Drums were beaten, goats were slaughtered. Her father's joy overflowed shamelessly. His love shifted openly from the first wife and her daughters to the second wife and her sons. The twins were carried proudly, fed first, celebrated loudly. Ifunanya and her sisters became shadows. She remembered how it burned, how anger fermented quietly inside her small chest, how she watched the twins grow, watched their mother glow with attention, watched her own mother shrink under neglect. Then, the memory sharpened. The twins' first birthday. The compound was busy. Women were cooking, laughter filled the air. The twins' mother took them inside to bathe them and stepped out briefly to fetch something, leaving them wrapped and lying together. That was when young Ifunanya entered the room. No one noticed her. She remembered standing there, staring at the twins, their soft breaths, their tiny mouths opening and closing. Something dark moved inside her, something she had not understood then, but understood too well now. She picked up a cloth. Her hands had not shaken. She tied it over their faces, tight. She held it there. She remembered the struggle, the small kicks, the muffled sounds. She remembered waiting until the movement stopped, waiting until silence took over. When the twins' mother returned, her scream tore the compound apart. She knew immediately that it was not ordinary. She cried. She rolled on the ground. She cursed the earth and the sky. She swore with bloodshot eyes that whoever had done this would never know peace. And then she laid the curse. a curse spoken with grief and conviction. Whoever did this, the woman cried, will carry their own children. They will know the joy of birth, but they will never celebrate 1 year. On the day their child turns 1, that child will return to the earth. The words were heavy, final. The memories ended. The silence lifted. Rain returned. Sound returned. Pain returned. Ifunanya screamed. She clutched her head, shaking violently. Tears mixed with rain on her face. She understood now, fully, completely. The curse had not missed its target. It had waited. 7 graves behind her hut. 7 children. 7 birthdays. Her punishment had been patient. Ofunwa stirred weakly in her arms. Ifunanya looked down at him, her heart tearing apart. No, she whispered hoarsely. The clay pot sat beside her, unmoved, its truth delivered. The curse had spoken, and it had not finished collecting.
Ifunanya lay beneath the Iroko tree long after the truth was revealed. She did not rise immediately. Her body shook violently as she cried, her forehead pressed into the wet earth, her fingers digging into the mud. She begged until her throat burned. Then the great Iroko tree spoke, not with thunder, not with fire, but with a voice that felt ancient and calm, like something that had watched generations rise and fall. Go back, it said. Return to the place where the joy was cut short. Ask for forgiveness from the woman whose heart you shattered. Ifunanya lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were red, swollen, but clear. Without thinking twice, she rose to her feet, clutching Ofunwa tightly. She did not wait for the rain to stop. She did not look back at the villagers calling her name. She ran. She ran like someone chasing her last breath. By the time she reached her father's compound, her legs were weak, her body trembling. The place looked smaller than she remembered, quieter, older. Her father sat outside, blind now, his eyes white and empty, his body bent with age. He did not recognize her voice when she greeted him, but the woman was still there, older, thinner, stronger in a quiet, frightening way. The moment Ifunanya saw her, her knees gave way. She fell to the ground, crying uncontrollably. I did it, she confessed. I was the one. Her words poured out like poison, finally leaving her body. She told everything, the jealousy, the anger, the cloth, the silence, the curse. The woman listened without interruption. When Ifunanya finished, she crawled forward and held the woman's feet, sobbing. Forgive me, she begged. If not for me, then for my child. There was a long silence. Then the woman spoke. I knew you would come back. I knew the curse would lead you here one day. It is finished. She bent slowly and lifted Ifunanya's face. I forgive you, she said. It is well with Ofunwa. He and the rest will stay alive. At that exact moment, Ofunwa's body went cold, ice cold. Ifunanya screamed and held him tightly, fear flooding her again. But before the scream could fully leave her mouth, the child laughed. A loud, clear laugh. He jumped from her arms, landed on his feet, and began to run around the compound, clapping and playing like a child full of endless strength. Ifunanya stood frozen, then collapsed in relief, laughter and tears mixing together. She ran back home with her son, holding him like a miracle she was afraid to touch. When people asked her where she had gone, what had happened, how death had suddenly released her child, she only smiled weakly and said, "The gods have forgiven." And behind her hut, the graves remained silent. For the first time, powerless.